Access granted.
What's up? So before we start with the automation part, I'd like to say a couple of things that, yeah, I may be harsh in my videos towards some groups of professionals, so to speak, right? So sometimes I say that, nobody cares about components, units, and whatsoever. I fully understand that, like, theoretically, in some ideal world, all of these things are important, and I fully understand why. What I'm trying to say here is that we're not living in the ideal world. As a guy who has worked with several startups during his professional career, and during my professional career, it's almost never like that. So the real focus is always on the delivery and all the instructions and protocols. Really, if you strip that off, that doesn't matter, because your product or service is low quality, or it doesn't satisfy the given niche. If it doesn't bring it, then all other things, they just don't matter. That's why maybe I was not really built for the big companies, for the big corporations, because these guys, they follow rules, protocols, instructions, and they really don't self-reflect on that, because I've seen people working there and I've met people working there. They're just like androids. There is no humanity left in such people, but that's just my opinion, of course. So I'm not trying to bring any hate. I'm just saying that my professional experience is unique, just as everybody's professional experience is also unique. So, as always, I am bringing my perspective. And this series is just about my perspective and vision of things as a QA who has worked in really dynamic, volatile, and ever-changing environments. But, there was a moment in my life when I just realized that I'd rather, work in some medium-sized business or successful startup, so to speak, rather than be on some radical end, like from the startup perspective, from the very seed startup, where this is pure chaos and you don't know what to do and it just being born as you're working there. And the other radical point is the big corporation, where you don't have any influence on that product. So something in the middle, I think, and that best suits me right now. So the purpose of the series, once again, is not to offend anybody. And I'm thankful and grateful for you watching this series. Alright, let's proceed with the automation now. With all that being said, what still pisses me off about the modern world is that people pay too much attention to a lot of unnecessary things. Just tell me, who's gonna care about which gender you are, or what you've said on social media, if there's no food left in the groceries or malls, or even at your plate? Who's gonna care about that? Another thing, who's gonna care about your depression if there's no certainty in the goods prices, basic goods prices, or your income sources for tomorrow? Who's gonna explore your rich inner world when they are completely involved in surviving within their own? I think you get the point. Same translates to the IT sphere. Too much theoretical BS about how an automation QA should count their test cases or lines of code coverage. Too much attention is given to things which can, change at any given moment in time. And real specialists and many promising young talent or already established talent, they get too distracted by providing the best fake-ass reports to their bosses so that you don't get yelled at or whatever. Because, as I've said many times during this series, it's all about money in this job. It's all about the money. It's always about the money. So let's not just lie to ourselves. And code coverage, fancy reports, none of these will actually bring you money. But focusing on the product most likely will. So where are you at and where are you going? These are the two questions that you have to ask yourself. Do your daily stand-ups in your organization even mean anything at this point? Or is it just, not this shit again, time waste? Take a moment to ask yourself. Inhale and try to feel where it resonates within you. And if it does, you're on the right track, my friend. And maybe you have just found the meaning of all this stuff, which is practice. So that's what we're in here for today. Automation practice. So without any further ado, let me switch to my screen and let's start building beautiful things. So I've created a test repository with the Playwright automation framework setup for you to play around with. I'm gonna provide this link in the video description so that you can clone this repository and try it for yourself if you need that, maybe on your project or maybe you're just learning or anything else. So basically, like for the new people, what is a Git repository is just a virtual space where your code of your project or your service is being stored. Well, not exactly virtual, because it's, of course, everything that is cloud-based or virtual is nonetheless being stored on
physical hard drives, or in the physical data centers, so to speak. But it doesn't matter. So you may look at this as a folder with another folders or files. And if you go to the code editor, it is basically the same here within this project. So what is being done is being cloned to your local device where you work from this. And then you, so to speak, push, it's being called git push. You push this code to your repository. In our case, it's GitHub, but it can be any other service like GitLab, Bitbucket, Azure DevOps, and all that shit. So here is the repository structure, or the test suite structure, so to speak. And let's go through it. So there's a few moments which I consider important and which I'd like to share with you before we proceed, because it's essential to understand if you're following me. These things are essential to understand so that you know how this framework works, how this specific setup of this framework works. So yeah, let's start with the configuration, because it's like always the main part here. So there are two layers of the configs. The parent config, which is like the base config, so to speak. So this is the file playwright.config.js, and let's go through it a little bit. So here we got the config constant, which is like this object, and this is an object which has properties like everything else, almost everything else. Everything is an object, so to speak. So this configuration consists of the project's description. So I got the template here, and I got the end-to-end, which we're gonna be doing in a short time. And yeah, so this is the name of your project and the test match, which patterns match the test files for this project that will be run as a part of this project. Then we got the timeouts like general timeouts, some timeouts for the assertions, of course. We got the global setup. I will show you this stuff a bit later. And we also got like lots of parameters like screenshots, other types of timeouts, video recording, and so on and so forth. So this is the base config. You may also call it the parent configuration. And then we got, so to speak, the child configuration. So it inherits the parent's parameters, like as you can see here. This is how it looks in the syntax. And it extends it for a specific browser. So when I was making these two levels, levels of configs, I was making it with such an idea in my mind, so that, as you know, Playwright supports different browser engines, which is Chromium, of course, for the Chrome and other Chromium-based browsers. Then we got the Gecko for Mozilla, and we got the WebKit for Safari. And I was making this in such an idea in mind, so that each config would either be created for a specific browser or a specific testing type. So we have the base config, which has like common settings for which will be used like everywhere. And then we got specific configurations which are either browser based or test layer based, so to speak. If we have the end-to-end testing, we got a specific config for that. If we're gonna be having an API or some specific setup, which is more of a custom setup, so to speak, then we gotta have a custom configuration for it. So this is the idea here, just to ease your work process. So what do we have here? We may run this in parallel, we may not. I've said it. This is also the workers param, so if I change it to 2, it's gonna launch like 2 browsers at once. But we do not have any tests written yet, so this is we will return to this a bit later on. Then we got the reporters, and we also have the the headless option, which means that when I'm launching the test, it's gonna either show me a browser or it's not gonna show it, so it's gonna run in the background. So for the purpose of this demo, I will be showing what's going on within the browser. And there are also some launch options for the browser instance, the browser context, as the Playwright development team says in their documentation. So we are using the Chrome, and it's got some arguments as the launch options. We're gonna launch it. For example, we're gonna launch in incognito mode. We're gonna maximize it from the start. We're gonna disable some extensions and other shit. So this is the configuration part. Now, let me go back to the global setup file. So this specific setup is made with an idea or with the possibility of being run on multiple environments. And these environments are being passed as the arguments to the command line when you launch your tests. So what I mean by that, let me show you this idea. Because on every project, and actually I have never seen people in other courses, I have never seen people doing these setups, which is strange to me because on any real project, like on every project that I have been working on, there are multiple environments. What I mean by the environment, this is once again for the new people. So imagine you have the URL or the internet address, so to speak, link, which leads you to the website, for example, this one. So basically a link is a resource, is a location of the things you see here in your browser. It's an address, just like your physical, apartment or house address. It's the same shit here. It represents an address, so to speak. So when you visit this stuff, it's the resources, the specific resources are getting loaded here. So, and the domain of this link is basically an environment. This is what we call an environment. So the same, and this environment comprises the data, the API, the services, but just for these specific domains. If we take another domain, for example, so that you understand, the same code, the same resources can be or may be running on multiple environments. But the data which is being populated for the specific environment will be different because the production data is not the same as the staging data. I think you get this point. So visually and functionally it may be the same, but the domains will be different, and these domains represent the envs. So how does this translate to the automation? What issue this poses? There comes a moment when a question arises in your head. I need to run my tests, the same test by the way, on multiple environments. And what do? I either copy paste a lot of fucking code, which is extremely hard to maintain in the future, or I try to implement a conditional environmental runs, so to speak, so that the same test suites will be running on different environments, and depending on which environment this test suite is running on, it will use the test data which is specified for that environment. So if we take some end-to-end testing which will be run on stage, then this test will be using the staging test data, because this test data, such as test users, billing accounts, search history or something like that, this test data applies only on staging, and you cannot run it on prod because the production has different database. So this means that we have a distinct command for the staging test runs in this case, and a distinct command for production test runs. I'm using several npm modules to set this shit up, such as crossenv and .env. How does this shit work? So, in terms of files, we have the global setup file and we have our configs. These are just a few. You may create as much as you want. Just keep this format like your config name, so to speak. And you can put some environmental variables within these configurations. And then in the global setup, you have this function which is called global setup. It uses the configs that you have provided. So you create an argument, a new argument, which will be passed as an npm command when you launch your tests. And it's called the test env name. So this is the test env name. And it is basically, it is calling the .env.config method, where you pass the configuration path and it overrides some default meaning. And it also overrides the default value. So here in my scripts, I have this command. Let's go back to it once again. The end-to-end tests on stage. So the test env is stage. If we go back here, so it's gonna pass the .env stage file, which is here, which has this, env name. And let me just back this up. I'm going to log this environmental variable into the console when the tests are launched. And let me launch this specific test on the specific environment just to back myself up, so that you see that it is really being run on the specific env. Okay, so as you can see, here it logs the stage, which means that it is using this value of this environmental variable. Now, if I run the same test but for another environment, you will see it should log the prod here. Yep, here it logs the prod, because in our configuration for the production env, the env name variable has the prod value. I think this is a vital solution, which lets you save lots and lots and lots of time by not being a copycat of yourself. So this is basically a representation of how one should follow the dry principle of the programming, which is basically don't repeat yourself. So this is as far as multi-environmental configuration goes. Alright, so let's go through some of the folders here. So the first one is data, and basically it's gonna contain files which gonna contain some test data which we are gonna invoke and use in our tests. What I mean by that, for example, you go to the test automation exercise website, and in your test case you're gonna click, let's say, sign up and login, header menu category. So you're gonna use this text here, you're gonna grab this text and you're gonna input it here. So add some new parameter and add this text. So and then you're gonna use this stuff, invoke it within your tests. So that's number one. So this is basically all you need to know about the test data for now. So the next thing is pages, and it contains this module or a file, a TypeScript file of page actions. And what is this essentially? So this shit represents the most common real user actions or interactions within a web page. And it's got a bunch of functions, each of which represents some specific action. So this is, for example, open URL, which is basically done by opening the web page like that. And you got a bunch of this shit, a bunch of this fucking stuff here. So pressing some keyboard keys, like emulating the pressing of a key, filling the elements with text or with info, clicking the elements, force clicking the elements, then, you know, waiting for an element to be not visible or to be visible, to be present, enabled or editable. So all this shit goes here, selecting drop downs, getting text from element, and of course getting cookies and setting the cookies for the web page. Operations with checkboxes. Yeah, lots and lots and lots of stuff. So the main idea of this module is so that you do not repeat yourself, so that you follow the dry principle within the object-oriented programming, and it's also like for your own convenience, so that we're gonna reuse these, we're gonna invoke these methods within some page object descriptions, but I call them services here. It actually doesn't matter that much, but so yeah, we're just gonna reuse this stuff as it comprises, like, I guess up to maybe 70% of your, like 70%, around 70% of your tests are gonna consist of these common actions, common page actions. So this is why it is encapsulated into a separate module here. The next thing is scripts, and actually there's not much to tell about these, as we have not yet begun the automation process, but so far I got the bash script for automatic git commit. What I mean by that is that by one click of, basically, you can achieve this via one click. So you have made some changes to your code, for example, see this, they are highlighted, and you've done that locally, and you want to push it to the remote code repository. It doesn't matter where it is, like whether this is for the GitHub, for example. If I had some another service, it just be another script. So basically what I gotta do is just click the auto commit here, and as you can see, the terminal logs, the one file was changed and there was one insertion, which is basically I've added a spacebar here. And if I visit my repository now, you're just gonna see the latest changes for this file are here. See, this is now, and this is the auto commit message. So this is just done for the lazy asses like me. So yeah, if you are a lazy ass like me, this is definitely for you. The next folder is services, and it basically gonna represent the page objects in the more traditional sense of it. So some patterns of the actions within a page are gonna be described here within these modules or new modules, and they are gonna be using the common actions from the page actions class. Like this one, for example, I got a template right here just to show you. So we got the class, which is a page template. It can be any page, and it extends the page actions, so we can like invoke this, for example, the open URL or any other method within this class. We can define elements right here, and the element locators, and of course the functions which use these locators and perform actions upon these locators. So basically this is all there is. And yeah, we're gonna describe this stuff in this manner. Almost the same goes for the API. The only difference is that we are not using the page actions within the API because there is no UI. There is no like visible part. It's only the data transferring requests and responses. So basically we describe the API methods in such manner that we construct a new context of the native Playwright. This is the native Playwright method. So every request, every API request is executed within an isolated context, so they do not like interact within each other, and there is no cache and other shit like an unwanted behavior between them. So yeah, we defined all the same stuff that any API method consists of, such as, you know, URL, the response, and this is like we invoke either get or post or put or patch or delete methods. All the shit that I've mentioned before, it's just written as a code, as a plain code. We got some headers if we are needed to authorize in order to use the endpoints or some API, we provide this shit. This may come in different shapes or forms, but for now, as an example, I think this is a perfect example for you. Yeah, and then we receive some response status. We assert that it equals the expected one. The expected is like 200 here, but we can put anything we want. This is by default, but you know, we may change, override the default settings as well. And we receive the response, we store the response, and yeah, we log it if the shit doesn't work correctly. And then we return some response parameter, or we may return the whole response and do some manipulations with it. So basically that is how it goes. Another thing I want to show you is the data generation. Sometimes we need to use, like lots, for the most part, for nearly every test, we gotta use some fake data. What I mean by that is, for example, we gotta generate the test email with a specific format, which is not like usually provided by some ready-made solutions like faker.js. So sometimes it's all very custom and can be used only with some specific tests within our project. So this is why we need these methods. These are just some examples. You may generate some random strings, numbers, special characters of the given length. Like if I want like this string, like ABCDF or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, this is gonna be the length of 6. If I want to do other way, I'm gonna do it other way. It doesn't matter. Or we can generate, you know, some specific date formats, date and time formats, or just random numbers, or just random fake ass data, so to speak. Yeah. So I think this is an essential part for the, you know, for the test data in general, because the ready-made solutions do not always provide us with all the data that we actually need, or with all the formats. So then there is the request logger, which is obviously being used within the API methods. In case, I tend to keep it this way, that if a test fails, I log its insides, so to speak, what is under the hood, only if it fails, to see what data has been transferred and what response was received. This is done in order to either report the defect or a bug or malfunction and report it ASAP, so that I don't have to manually reproduce this shit. And yeah, this is basically for your own convenience. And then there is the logger, which basically logs the network activity of the web page. What I mean by that is, like, if I, for example, open the network in our Chrome DevTools and I refresh this page, you will be able to see a whole lot of different requests, different resources, scripts, images, and all that shit, which is being loaded as a part of this web page. So if you go to any of it, it consists like of the URL, and you can see the method, and you can see the status. This is the same API, only via the different representation within, as a part of the network activity. So basically what this does, it just captures the method and URL and status and URL of the requests which are outgoing and incoming. Nothing more, nothing less. So we don't dig deep, but if something fails, we will be able to see it in the logs. That some request returns error 500, which is like a server error, which means that backend is dead, for example, or something like that. And then there is a method which intercepts the network response by some URL. So for example, if I were to wait for this specific resource,
I would input this URL to that method as an argument, and it would when this request would have been executed, I would have catch this data, and I could extract this data later on within my tests, and I could manipulate this data and maybe send some, you know, modified request to this server, or do other things which I need to do within my tests. So basically this is what it's needed for. And then there is the tests folder, which is basically for our tests. We're gonna be adding stuff here as we automate the demo site functionality, or as we cover those cases that are presented to us. So this is some kind of a spec template. Basically, it consists of description, like the test describe, which is basically describes a set of tests, or a test, let's say test suite, within the larger test suite, so to speak. We got some actions that are executed before everything else gets executed, like before all the tests gets executed. Then we got some logic. It may or may not be present, by the way, but we got some logic that executes after all tests are executed. And of course we got the tests themselves, and we got the test steps. So this is everything is getting logged into the console as we proceed. And yeah, I think this is all I gotta say about the tests for now. And I would also like to mention a couple more things that are maybe not as vital but still need to be present on your project, I mean on your test suite, framework, you may call it whatever you want. So the first one is the git ignore file, which basically has all the patterns which are being ignored while I'm pushing my code from my local device to the GitHub in this case, or to any other code repository storage service, so to speak. So this is what it's for. And of course there is the package JSON file, which is basically a description of your project, of this project in this case. So it's got the scripts which I can launch through my IDE or just via the terminal by typing npm run, for example, UI mode. It's gonna open me a Playwright UI, so something like this. This is like an essential part and very useful and convenient stuff for debugging your test specs and your test in general. And we got some, you know, this automatic commit that I have mentioned earlier, and all other stuff, the repository URL, and all the modules which are being used, npm modules which are being used in this repo. There's also another thing that I wanted to show you, and it is basically the continuous integration, or so-called CI/CD setup. So, which basically means how your tests are going to be running remotely. So my current configuration uses the GitHub as the VCS, and of course the Playwright framework where the tests are run. So let's take a look at it. From the code point of view, it looks like that. So we start from the config. So I've set it to fully parallel, and I'm gonna run the tests in 2 threads. So which means that 2 scenarios can be executed simultaneously in 2 independent Chrome browser instances. So that's how tests are gonna be run. So the next, here I got the template test, which is gonna be running, which is basically, here I got the 2 tests here. I've set them in a way that the first is gonna always pass, and the second is gonna always fail. So we're just gonna open the Google page, the Google search page, I mean, and then either pass this test or fail it. I mean, pass test number 1 and fail test number 2. I am also using the Playwright HTML npm module, which is a custom module developed by like independent guy who just shared this solution for free, which I'm like super grateful for. I'm gonna leave the link to the article written by this guy who like also shares some useful tips there regarding this stuff. So this is gonna be an HTML report, and here is the configuration for the report in the config, in the Playwright config, which is basically gonna use the test. It's gonna be constructed upon the results in the tests folder. Here it's got the custom title, it's got embedded assets and attachments, which is basically screenshots and videos. Here's the output, basic output folder, and yeah, these we're not gonna start a server because it's gonna then open automatically after each run, and we don't want to do that in CI. So this is basically a setup for the reporter itself and the config in the Playwright. Now what I've got here is I've created this folder .github, and it's got the workflows inside of it. as I mentioned before, we have the multi-environmental setup, which means that we can either run the tests on the staging environment or the production environment, or like whatever you want to call it. But let's stick with this description, with this terminology, for the sake of this demonstration. And here I've got, let's take a look at the YAML file, which is basically a description of the CI/CD workflow for the tests, for the end-to-end tests in staging. So you can create like a specific YAML for each and every test suite or each and every test project right here. So it doesn't matter, but you know, for the sake of this demo, it's being called end-to-end test stage. So let's go like, let's make a breakdown of this code right here. So this commented section is actually referring to how and when all the conditions based upon which this workflow will be triggered. So this is the cron syntax, which is basically a scheduler which runs your commands or your scripts at a given time, and you specify that time. So if you're familiar with the cron, that's okay. If you're not, you may search like something like cron syntax to get more familiar with it. This is basically a module which is gonna be like triggering this workflow. And the uncommented section, because I made it so for the sake of this demo, is basically means that this flow will be triggered upon the code push to the main branch. So if I make some change, as you can see here, and then I push my code to the GitHub, it's gonna trigger this workflow. So the next section, we got the variables for our workflow. And you can basically visit this link, and here are all the variables and the secrets. The secrets are basically encrypted variables. We're gonna get to that in a minute. So as you can see, here is everything that we need here. And I've basically also, I've also got the Slack integration built in here, so I'm gonna show you that after the tests run. We'll get into that in a moment. Right, okay, so the next section is jobs. This is basically the things that, the processes that are gonna be run like one after another in the CI. So this job is called end-to-end tests, and it consists of different steps. So we got the environment set up here, it's the latest Ubuntu runner on the GitHub itself, and then we got the steps. So what is interesting here? It installs the Node.js, which is being set here, so it's like 20 and higher versions. Then it installs all the dependencies, which is basically npm modules, the ones that you can see here, and some other basic stuff. It installs the TypeScript node, and it also installs the Playwright with the Chrome browser, as you can see right here. So the next step is pretty interesting one. This is an interesting solution, which may be applicable on your projects if you're using the same technical stack, but it's not limited to it. So it's called the create.env file. So the tricky part is that the data within the configuration files is usually sensitive. So what I mean by that, you got some API keys, you got some database access credentials, which is basically an internal, all of that is basically the data for internal usage within your company, within your project, so to speak, within your business. And if it leaks, this is gonna be a problem, like for you personally and for the company in general. But there is a way to overcome such, this issue or this problem or these roadblocks, so to speak. These configurations locally, they are in the gitignore file, as you can see right here. So when I'm pushing any changes, they do not appear on the remote repository. They do not appear there. Which means that we have somehow to create it in the CI, because otherwise our test will fail, because they wouldn't know which config file to use, because it does not exist yet there. So we gotta create the .env file. In this case, we are using the secrets, which is the config stage. And let me show you. So this is the .env stage. I'm echoing this information and I am writing it to this file. Basically, I'm creating it like programmatically as a step within the CI/CD process. So this is the .env here, which has got the env name right here. And let me go to the repository variables and secrets so that you can see where this stuff is located. Here I got two secrets. Basically, the value of the config stage secret is basically everything that you can see here. You can have like as many of them as you want here. And it is encrypted, so you cannot see what is there. Even I cannot, as a repository author, even I cannot see that stuff. So that's good, that's good. Same goes for the config prod, which, you know, the production is always more sensitive and this data should be 100% protected. So let's go back to our CI YAML file. Yeah, and I create these configurations there, and I'm using them as the secrets, and I'm writing the values of those secrets into these files. And then we are running the end-to-end tests, and we're using the XVFB module for that, because this module you cannot run the tests remotely. It's a virtual display. You can read about it if you wanna get more details, but you know, I'm just comfortable with the fact that if I'm using this, it like emulates the real display on which you're like watching this right now, but it kinda emulates it programmatically, and you can, you know, execute all the necessary actions same as locally. And I'm running the command which triggers the test suite, which is basically a variable set here, which is end-to-end testing stage, and we wait for this test to complete. So yeah, the next step is pretty tricky one, mostly because to the fact that, as you can see, I've got two YAML files which are basically two separate workflows, and the setup of the HTML reporter here only allows us to set the single output folder, which means that, and we do not store, I haven't yet found the possibility to store history of the HTML reports. So this creates an issue that, for example, when the tests are being run on staging, this report will be generated and displayed. But when the same tests are gonna be run in production, the already existing report will be rewritten, so we won't be able to see it if it failed. We'll need to rerun the test, and then it's gonna, you know, pose another issue that we won't be able to see the most recent report. So given this info, I had to create a custom solution. And basically ChatGPT helped me with it. I've just added a couple new steps, and the first one is prepare HTML report directory. So I'm making a custom directory here. Yeah, first and foremost, to publish the HTML report, I am using GitHub pages to publish this report. And this is my settings page here. This is my static URL for the website where all the artifacts and resources are being published. And the build and deployment source is deploy from a branch, which is the GitHub pages branch. And I'm deploying the, you know, the root folder of the, so to speak, the workspace. So this is the website, and this is the settings. Now let's get back here a little bit. So yeah, basically what I'm doing in this step is I'm clearing the workspace, and then I'm creating a new folder, which has the same name as the test suite, so we do not get confused by, you know, anything. And then the report is being generated after the test run. So basically I'm making a custom folder, and then I copy the contents of the HTML report to this custom folder, and then I'm using this action to deploy this HTML report, so you can actually see it by following that URL. I'm publishing this dir there. Yeah, these steps are always executed. It doesn't matter if it's failing or not, these two steps will always be executed. And the next part, the final part, is basically I send the custom message to the Slack in case of either success, failure, or cancellation of the workflow. Cool, so let's see how this stuff actually works remotely. So I'm gonna make some minor change within my source code of my project here, and I'm going to push these changes to the GitHub. And as you can see, it should trigger both of these flows as separate jobs. And if everything is done correctly, it should execute it, and it should create and generate and publish two separate HTML reports. So let's try this shit out. So this is the commit, and we go to the workflows page, and as we can see, here are two of our workflows. They have been like triggered by our commit. So one's for staging, one is for production. And let's just wait a little bit for these workflows to complete. So here it installs all the dependencies, creates the end file, runs the tests. One is passing, one is failing, just as we expect it to be. And yep, this all happened pretty fast, so it created the HTML report directory, custom directory, for this specific env, and it also published the report. What is happening next? So if we go to our Slack, here we can see the alerts. So as this is a failure, this is the message that is being sent in case of failure. So test suite, here is the test suite name, has failed. And you can either view logs right here, and it's gonna show you, it's gonna lead you to the step which has actually failed. Or you can view a report, and here is the report. And as you can see, so this is the static URL, which is the GitHub pages URL, and this is our custom folder, specifically for this test suite. I mean, like, specifically for this workflow. This is the custom report made by this guy, Rodrigo Odin. I'm gonna leave his contact info in the video description. This much respect for this guy, because I have been looking for some decent Playwright reporting solutions, like, you know, forever. And yeah, this is the dashboard. It shows you some specific data, like how long execution time, you know, start end time, the pie charts of the cases that have passed, failed, and so on and so forth. And we also have this tests button right here. If we go here, we can see the scenario which has failed, and imagine we want to see some more details, so we click here on the details. And as you can see here, it shows us the error, and it shows us the code snippet from within our IDE, within our source code. And it also shows that we have expected a true Boolean value, and we got it false. And here are all the steps of this test case. You can see the code snippets, like, by clicking here and unfolding this part, and also this one. And here is the interesting part, which personally I like this one very much. This is the whole essence of this reporting thing, you know, because everybody can read the console logs, but it's difficult to, you know, to show it in the proper way. So this is the screenshot. As you can see, the Google search page has been opened here. But if you want even more details, here is the video attachment, and you can actually play back this stuff. Yeah, so as you can see, it opens the Google search page right here.
And here is another report for another workflow. Here it is. So watch closely the URL. This is for staging and this is for prod. So basically it works just as we programmed it to. So this is end-to-end test stage and this is end-to-end test prod.
Basically, this is the setup for the CI/CD process between Playwright, GitHub Actions, or GitHub Workflows, and Slack Messenger. Okay, so I think this concludes the theoretical, so to speak, part, but it's also practical of this framework initial setup. And we may finally proceed to automating these test cases. Not all of them, but, you know, just some of them for the sake of this demo.
So this is the website for practicing automation. And here we got a list of test cases. So let's open the first case right here, which is called register user. And here we got the steps which we are going to automate. So let us start simple. Of course, the first one's gonna be launch the browser. It's like obvious shit. It doesn't have to be you know, specified as a separate step, but anyways. So let's go to our tests. So I will be modifying this stuff. So I need to go to the services, and here I got the pages template, and I'll just copy this template and I'll call it something like automation practice. And we will be using this stuff for you know to describe elements and methods and element actions on that website that we are automating. So let's call this class an automation practice. And what do we need to do at first? So here we got the URL. I would suggest to store it somewhere in the test data or even in the configuration. This is a best practice. Let's say we got our config staging here, and let's call this variable a base URL, and we're gonna put it right here. We may also add it to the prod, but I don't think that this is like necessary, because I've already shown you how it works while you are running the same tests on different envs. So I think I'll skip the prod for now. So let's focus on the staging. So yeah, we got our base URL here. The next step, homepage is visible. Verify that homepage is visible successfully. And now let's go to our page object and let us describe this scenario with a bunch of methods. So we got the first step is open URL, and we can call this URL from the environmental variables. So it's going to be like that, process env base URL. So the next step is verify that homepage is visible successfully. And how do we do that? what can help us to verify that this page is actually loaded? I guess some element, I believe, but you know, it's hard to tell because this step is not specific. So if that shit happens, and it may happen, like, because you're just seeing the page is loaded, yeah, that's fine, it's loaded. But from the automation perspective, you gotta specify such things so that, you know, the automation QA does not get confused, because at this point, all I'm doing is I'm like improvising with this step. But let's just check that the logo is visible right here. So let us try and search for the distinct locator. Okay, we got it. So this is, you know, this is the logo PNG. This is an image basically. And this is going to be our first locator. So yeah, this is going to be, I don't even think we need the read only here, as this is just a demo, so it does not really matter. So this is going to be our first locator. And we gotta call this element somehow. Let's say maybe logo, header logo. And this is going to be, we define this locator within the constructor. So yeah, the header logo, and this is the data type of this property. So this is the first thing we do. We define, of course, the page property, which is gonna let the playwright interact with the page itself. And then we define the elements, I mean the properties, which later are being used as elements within some methods. So I hope you get the point. So the first is like header logo. It is a string because the data type is a string. And within the constructor, we define the locator itself. So here it is. And then within the method where we describe all the actions and interactions within the page, we also call the wait for element method, and we send the header logo as an argument to this function. So basically this is from the page actions, and it waits until the element is visible. Okay, so hopefully we got this step. We will see when we run the test. Now the next thing we gotta do is click on this sign up and login button. So the first thing we gotta do is actually get this locator. Let's inspect it. I believe that there is not so much of the problems here with the locators on this side, because it was created with the purpose of automation practice, so I think the locators are fine here. But believe me, it's not gonna be like that on your project, probably, or you know, most likely, because some frameworks create dynamic locators and they are like different every time, and you gotta click the specific one. So there's a lot of fuckery and there's a lot of mindfuck with this stuff. But not here, hopefully. So here we got the locator for this sign up login menu category, and we gotta add this element here, sign up header. Also, yeah, all the locators are going to be strings, so you may not worry about that. Sign up, where's the sign up? Here's our locator, and we gotta call this method, which is gonna click on it. This click element, and we're gonna pass this sign up header to the click method. So let's proceed. Verify new user sign up is visible. So yeah, let's actually click it here. By the way, that's why manual is important. And you know, before you do automation, you might want to do some manual testing of all the functionality, so you better understand the flow, and you know, you may see all the stepping stones, possible stepping stones which you may encounter. So we gotta verify that this text is present on the web page. Let's inspect it. Sign up form. I don't quite remember how to get the XPath for this shit, so let's go ahead and, you know, ask the chat. Let me just go to the GPT and ask it to print me out the locator. Okay, I guess we got it. Let's just check this stuff. This one goes by text. Yeah, this is good. So what's user sign up text? User sign up text. It's also gonna be a string, and we are gonna define it here. So we may put it in such quotes so that it's defined as a string, that you know, that it sees it as a string. And we gotta check that this stuff is present. Okay, so let's wait for element, this user sign up text. Let us see what's the next part here. So we gotta enter name and email address. So we gotta fill this and these fields, and I guess we gotta click on sign up next. Yeah, so basically these two steps. Okay, so let us write down, collect the selectors. By the way, this one's for developers. you don't even know how much QAs are grateful, how much automation QAs are grateful if you put and create, add these attributes, specific data QA for the specific elements. We just want to give you a hug if you do so, guys. So please, please do so if you have the time and possibility. Every QA, every automation QA is gonna be grateful, like forever grateful for this stuff, because we are always in search of distinct locators. All right, so sign name field string and sign up email field string, and let's define the locators here. Sign up name and sign up email, just to double check that it's unique. Yep, it's really unique. Let's do this stuff here, and also the sign up button, and let's define this stuff here as well. Okay, so we gotta fill our name and email fields with some fake data. So in order to generate some test data, let's first import our test data generator here. It's called data generator, and yeah, it automatically creates this path. And let's define this data generator in our test suite. Let's name it data generator. Let's initialize a new instance of this data generator class. Let's also create an email variable, which will not have any value, because we will give it value when the test starts. So basically we'll do it here. We define the page actions at first. Well, you may ask, why don't I initialize the page actions class here with all the other classes? It's because it does not operate without the page object right here, without this property. And you cannot, unfortunately, the Playwright architecture does not allow you to call this page, this property, the page instance, from within the test describe method. It only allows you to do so from the test itself. So that's why we're doing this stuff like this. So as in every tool, there are certain limitations, but that doesn't like strip away that, all other advantages of this tool. So I don't want to talk shit about Cypress, but if we take Cypress, for example, you're just gonna it's just gonna fuck with your brain so much before you even set it up that you'll just leave that tool at some point. But that's just my experience with it. Because as a specialist, I want a dynamic and I want a flexible tool, for God's sake. And I want a tool that, can be an extension of myself, so to speak, of my proficiency. And that's what Playwright is to me, for now at least. Alright, so we got page action set, and we gotta give our email a value, and the value is gonna be the data generator random email. And yeah, it's gonna generate a random email. Let me take a look. It's gonna return it in this format as an auto test, the current test date, and basically also a random string, and with the test.com domain. So this is what the email is gonna be. So let's go to our page object once again, and we also gonna need some name, won't we? So let's do the same for the name, actually, shall we? Name, and name is going to be data generator random string with a length of, let it be 10 symbols. So it's gonna be something like this, something like this, but different every time, like random every time. And since we have initialized this stuff here, we will have to push two arguments to this method, to the register user method. It's gonna be name as a string and email as a string. And then we gonna define the sign up methods here. So we're gonna use the fill element, and this method fills element with some specific text data. So we're gonna pass the sign up name field at first, and then we're gonna pass the name argument, which is gonna be passed to this function, to this method. And let's do the same but with this sign up email, and it's gonna be an email here. And then we will click on our sign up button, and hopefully we will be able to sign up. Okay, let's try and do this manually. Test Alex. And alright, so let it be like test alex1 test.com. Okay, that's cool. So the next thing we gotta do is verify that enter account information is visible. So we gotta verify that this text is present on the page. I might actually use the XPath here. Let us try and find this locator. Okay, so this is how it's gonna look. So at this point I'm not bothering too much with the locators, once again, as it's not too complex. But this may not be the case on your project. Just keep that in mind, that here it may seem easy, but it may not be so easy in terms of specific locators, interactions within a different project, so to speak. Let's call it account info text. And we're gonna wait for this element to be present, to be visible on the page. Now let's see what do we have next. So we gotta fill different details such as title, name, email, password, and date of birth. So as you can see, there's a lot of stuff out here. Yeah, so we gotta click this radio button here, I guess. Okay, let's try this one. If it goes wrong, I can always switch to the label part, I think. Here it works. Now let's try this one, okay. It's pretty unique to me. It's 1 out of 1, it's fine. Let's call it something. Title Mr. Radio button. Where's the string? These, yeah. I got some code auto completion. Here is my locator for this. The next name, email is already completed, but we might, we might actually check that it's filled. We might check that we have these values within these fields. So let's do that for the name field. And I guess I've had the method for it. Check element attribute. Yeah, we need a locator for it. And yeah, let's specify this locator. So the name field, this is a string, and let's also do so for email field, because it's gonna be the same, only with different values. And yeah, okay, so let's input these locators here. Just in case, you always gotta check that this locator is unique. So this is the data QA name. I guess it's gonna go like this, and I'm pretty sure that another locator is just like this, an email. So let us just double check this shit. Yeah, pretty much same. I guess same goes for password. So we might just fill this stuff as well for the password. So word field string, and this password field is gonna equal to, of course, to the password. So we will have to check two elements attributes right here. So we need a locator of an element that we are checking attribute for. So this is gonna be, the first one's gonna be, I guess, the name field. Then we need the attribute. So what attribute of this element are we checking? So this is the name, this one. And the attribute is called value. You can see value, test Alex. So this is pretty much the one. So the attribute is called value, and the value of this attribute. So this is tricky, pretty tricky one, but I hope you understand that. An element has an attribute is called value, but it is just the name of the attribute. It's not the value that we are checking. The value is this one, test Alex here. Yeah, and since we are generating a new name each time, we're gonna pass this name here. Same goes for the email. Let's just double check it. Name, email, value, yeah, the same here, the same is here. So we are also checking the value attribute here, and we're checking that it contains the email. If you want to know how this works, it gets the attribute, the value of the searchable attribute, and it expects it to equal the value that we are sending to this method. So hopefully we completed this. The moment of truth will come when I'm gonna be launching this test. And yeah, and hopefully, let's hope that I won't have to fix anything. But this is a demo anyways, so I'm just showing you the way I do things with the Playwright automation framework. So yeah, then we're gonna fill the password, and this is also an interesting part here, because commonly for the test user we use some common password, so to speak. So we may just add it to the data right here, to the test data, I mean, and call it something like common password. Because in a real project you may have like lots and lots of such users, and so that you just know that this stuff is pretty neat and comfy when you got it all structured the proper way, because it makes your framework scalable. And scalability is great for, it's great for the projects where you need to automate a lot of stuff and run it in many
several threads or so. That's why that's like the initial reason why I put so much time and effort into explaining you all the setup, all the little details here, because everything matters right here, everything. So we are generating our password, and I'll just add it here as a variable. I'll give it some value here. Yeah, so I've added the password to common password to the test data, and what I need to do now is I need to import this test data. So let's do that. Import test data from the test data, of course. We will be passing the password to this method. So password is gonna be a string, and we will pass it as we get to the the final part of this, of automating this specific scenario. So we will fill elements, which is the password field, and we will fill it with the password argument. We should be passing there from within the spec file, when we call it in the spec file, of course. Alright, so what next do we have to fill here? The date of birth. This is interesting. It is basically a drop down. Select an option. Okay, sounds good to me. Let's define the locators at first, shall we? So we got the data QA right here. This attribute, it's unique, so this is the days. I'll just quickly do this stuff and skip to the next part. Right, so I've defined the locators here, and the next thing I gotta do is click and select the birth date. Okay, so let's do it this way. So this select drop down option, and then we need to pass the locator of the drop down and the value of the option. So let me just double check that it really does this stuff. So yeah, we define the drop down here, we give it a locator, it clicks the drop down, and the next is the option element. Yeah, this is the same element, and it just adds the option to this locator. So this is kinda, complex locator, because the first locator part of it is the drop-down locator, which is we are sending as an argument here, and the second one is the option locator. And option locator usually has this structure, so it's predefined here. So as you can see here, option value, and here is the value. And since we are selecting all three, let me just add a couple lines of code here. Yeah, day drop down, and option is gonna be my day is 29th. This is month. Month value is 4. So it's important when you're seeking for the locators. Usually, the text value, the text within this element may differ from the attributes, from the attribute values. So it's important for you to understand that we are looking for the value of this attribute, for the value which is of this attribute, which is value. Okay, and let's go for the year drop down, and the year is pretty much more understandable here. Mine is 1991. Jesus, I'm so effing old. Okay, so let's imagine that we are done with this step, and the next thing we gotta do is select checkbox sign up for our newsletter. So let's just inspect the shit. This is the checkbox. You can go another way with it, and if it's not unique, let's say you may go with the class of the parent element. So first off, it's gonna look for this class, and when it finds the match for this class, it's gonna search within this class, it's gonna search for this locator. So sometimes we do that, just to make sure that if something is changing on the web page due to some new updates or new deploys, so that our locators are stable. So this one thing I've learned from my mentors, and now I'm just doing a free giveaway to the world from myself. So this is a checkbox, newsletter checkbox, string, of course. Let's define this stuff, and we are going to check this. So yeah, we are gonna use the checkbox method, and the locator is going to be a newsletter checkbox right here. Okay, so what's the next step? So select checkbox, receive special offers from our partners. So basically same approach should be applicable right here. Yeah, this is a unique one, I'm not gonna change it. So yeah, let's just do the same here. So special, let's name this locator special offers checkbox, which is going to be a string, and let's define its locator here. So yeah, and let us also this checkbox, this special offers checkbox here. So the next step is basically filling the address information. I think at this point you already know and you should be familiar with the approach, so I'm just gonna skip to the part where I have all of this stuff described within my page object. So as you can see, I've added lots of locators here, and I've also refactored this method a little bit and made some changes, like, you know, pushed the I moved the URL to the test data. As you can see, it's here now, so we're calling it from the config. And yeah, as you can see, this method, so to speak, this is starting to look like some kind of monstrosity. So there is one way of getting rid of this, because otherwise it's going to be very difficult, and, you know, it's non-practical when we initialize it here. So one way of dealing with these things, like lots of arguments within your functions, is creating an interface and pass it here as a single argument. Let's ask ChatGPT to create us this interface. Okay, so we got this interface, and let's just paste it to our page object. So yeah, I've added this interface into my page object, like before, because TypeScript does not allow us to do it within the class. And now let's change these arguments to a single one, which we'll actually call this interface. Like params, register user params. And we also have to change these arguments right here. Now they are a part of register user's interface. So we must call them as these interface properties, because this is an object, lots of properties. Okay, seems nice. We must also check that our interface params, that our test data params to these params. We will be defining the test data for this specific test, like within the test spec. Now I have filled all these user fields for a new account. Let's create account and finish with this test. Okay, so what do we have to do next here? We must verify that account created text is visible. So once again, I gotta add a new locator here, this one, and I guess we will search it by next path. Yeah, cool. So here it is. Oops, missed with the quotes. Let me correct my quotes here. So what we have to do is wait for this element, account created text. Let us assume that it has been created. What's next? So I got the continue button here. Okay, let me add this locator as well. Here it goes. And let's add the method that is gonna click this stuff. The next step is verify that logged in as username is visible. So this is what we have to verify here. Let's inspect it. You know what? I'm gonna ask ChatGPT for this locator, because this part is dynamic. It depends on which username I generate, and it's gonna be different for each test. So this is called dynamic data, or, you know, dynamic test data, which varies from test to test and which is never the same. So basically, I think I need an X path for it. So let me just outline this stuff. Okay, let's ask GPT for another locator. So here is this X path. I've localized the parent element, and now let's localize the child element. Yep, seems nice. And let's try. Now it's working. Okay, yeah, this is always an issue. I forgot to put some brackets or some symbol. Yeah, not the easiest locator to localize, but still we got it. So let's declare it here. And we're just gonna add it here as well. Now, this is the thing I don't really like here, because this part is going to be dynamic. So I guess that we'll have to send it as a variable to the constructor, so that it substitutes, you know, whatever's here. So we gotta add it right here. Yeah, so this is going to be the name here. The name is going to be a string. And now what we can do is add it here. So hopefully it will return this. If we pass the name to the constructor, it's gonna substitute it here, and we're gonna receive the thing we need. So let's add this here, logged in text. And we gotta click the delete account, I think. So yeah, let's add this stuff here as well. And what do we have to see as the last step? Verify that account deleted is visible and click continue. Let's delete it. Okay, I guess this is the text that we have to verify. So I guess I'll just reuse this selector right here. Delete it. Yeah, This is the one. We just substitute this created for deleted. Deleted text. And the final step is we gotta click the continue button. I think this one should be the same as the previous. It should have the same locator. Yeah, I see it has it. Cool. We just gonna click this button and hopefully this is it.
Now we have to do a few more things before we can actually run this thing. We gotta import all the missing parts within the test spec file, which will actually run and be triggered by the Playwright framework. So let's import missing stuff right here. Automation practice at first, and we got the data right here. I've also changed the config workers back to 1 because we're gonna be running a single test, so we don't need to more than 1 workers in this case, because we only got a single test here. We also need to define the test data here, and since we got it right here, now let me just copy the interface. So yeah, let's go one by one. So URL is gonna be process and base URL, and the name is gonna be from the test data. It's gonna be like name. Email is gonna be an email here. Okay, so the password is gonna be taken from test data, as you can see, common password. So we might want to define this register user method, to encapsulate it within a test step, so that we don't have to do it here, not to make it like very, very large. Let's call it practice page. So yeah, I'm just gonna encapsulate this, make it a step. Test step, like register new user. So we had to do a couple to make this work, and let's move this code so it's more visible. Okay, so this now should act as a test step. It should be logged the proper way, I guess, when we launch this test execution. Okay, and so we gotta call this method. So practice page, register user data. I had to tweak the select dropdown option method a little bit, but just found out that Playwright has the native select option method, so it should be good now. So I've also made some changes just for this run so that it opens the web report after the run and we can see the video asset, for example. Okay, so this is what we got. So let's launch this spec, shall we? End-to-end test stage. Let's go. Okay, it opens the browser and it's going to go very fast, very fast. See how fast it's filling the form, account created, account deleted. Yep, and here is the report. So let's go to the tests. Finished in 16 seconds. It does not have any videos or screenshots here because the test actually passed. We may go in slow motion for you to see how it actually executes. So let's try this again. I've just increased the timeout between the actions. This is the slow-mo property in the config. So let's try it out once again. Yep, now it's a bit slower, so you can see every single action being executed automatically. See, account created and deleted. So that's perfect. So this is just for the new people so that you are aware of that I'm not clicking anything when the automation test runs. So let me start this stuff. As you can see, it's just running by itself. No hands. Here it executes all these steps. It fills all the forms, fills all the fields, checks the checkboxes, and creates the account as a final step of all this, and then deletes the account. See? Yep. Yep, and we got the report. Cool, so now let's try and run this test in the CI.
Okay, so let's push our changes to the GitHub and trigger the staging end-to-end test stage workflow. Okay, so we pushed the changes. And here is the staging workflow that has been triggered. So let's just wait and see how it actually runs. Okay, so it failed. I guess I forgot to update my configuration. As you can see, expected string and got undefined. So yeah, I know what's the issue here. So as we updated this config, so we've added a new value to it. So what I need to do right now is to go to the actions, to the variables, to the repository secrets and variables, and update this value. So as it is creating a config out there in the CI, this stuff needs to be updated. Now I can rerun all jobs here, so now it should use the updated config, hopefully. So let's wait and see once again how it performs. Okay, so it didn't fail from the... Oh yeah, it actually passed. That is great news, guys. And we're done in post checkout. And now, yep, we received a success alert. Here is the report, I guess. Oh yeah, this is an older report. It should be updated soon. As you can see, there's no screenshot because it didn't even launch. It didn't even get to the URL. But this is not the report I'm looking for right now. Oh yeah, so see, it takes some time for the report to actually be updated. So don't panic if you don't see the most fresh report. It may take up to 1 minute, I guess. So we got this right here. We got the before hooks, we got all of these steps. We can see the code snippet for every step right here, which is kind of cool, don't you think? So now I would suggest to intentionally fail this test and see whether the report actually grabs the video and whether we can watch it. So let me go to this method and let me update it a little bit. So I'm gonna import expect, and then I'm gonna, after all of this stuff, I'm gonna expect false to equal true. And I'm gonna once again push these changes, make an automatic commit. And let's go to the CI, to the actions, and see how it performs now, and wait for the report to be generated so that we can look at the attachments. So just give it a little bit of time. It should fail in the end. Yep, as expected. Now let's upload the report. Okay, as we can see, here is the new report and with a failed test. So let's go to this test details. So here we got the screenshot of the final page where the fail happened, and here we got a video recording, as you can see how this test runs out there. That's amazing, actually. I'm loving this framework and this setup. This is kind of universal. You can use it on your own projects, just, modifying the source code a little bit. So feel free to, fork this repository and use it to suit your own needs. So this is a free giveaway, my time and effort. Like, I just wanted to do this. I just felt I had to show people how that automation is not that complex and extreme and whatsoever. It's a job like any other job, and damn, I love my job, not gonna lie, I love this job. Hope you will too. I guess we can wrap up with this practical part, and next time I'm gonna show you how to automate API methods, and that's gonna be the last one regarding this QA course. Okay, so let's switch to the API automation. I have selected several cases for this quick showcase, and we are gonna be working with the same website, only with the API part, so there's no UI going to be present in this showcase. So the first case is gonna be, we're gonna get all products list, as this is a web store, which are basically these products. The next API is going to be search product, so we are going to search a product by its title. The next, we are going to emulate real user sign up or registration. Well, simply put, it is gonna be the same as with the UI, but just without the UI. As you can see, all the params are here, like email, password, birth month, year, first name, last name, and all that stuff. And last but not least, we are gonna verify that the newly created user exists. So we're gonna kind of verify login with valid credentials, and we're gonna check that our response message is like this, that user exists. Okay, so I have created a little Postman collection for this showcase. And I suggest everybody who is into automation, or who wants to switch, or who wants to develop there in this direction, or maybe, you know, who even already there. I'm not telling that you should do this or you must do this. This is just a recommendation from a QA to the QAs. So I suggest doing like manual checking and construction of these methods at first, because it's gonna give you more insight to how each method works and how it is really tested. So I got this collection, I got a couple of variables which we're gonna be using. The first is email. Random email is generated here before each request is execution, and also I got the common password value here. So the first request is the get products request. It's a get request, and as you can see, I've already tested this one. So basically we are receiving the list of products, and you can see them here by name. It's just an abstract description, or simply put it, raw data, which is taken from the database and sorted in a proper way, or represented to us in a proper way. So here we got the like blue top, man t-shirt, sleeveless dress, and so on and so forth. So these, you can see these on the products page in this web store. So the next is the post request, and it is a search product endpoint. And here we got the form data param, which goes by the name of search product, and we're gonna search for man t-shirt, so that it returns us only products which have this string within the name. As you can see, here are all the products, but here we see only men's t-shirt. Like if we search for just the t-shirt, we're gonna receive lots of products with a t-shirt within the information related to this product. Then we're gonna register a new user. As you can see, there's lots of params here. So we got an email variable, which is generated as a pre-request script right here, and name is also taken from the collection of variables. And we are gonna go like this, and we're gonna check that we are receiving the 201 response code, which means that record has been successfully generated. And we're gonna check this message. And the last request here is, of course, the verify login. We're gonna post a request with email and password for the user that has just been generated or registered or completed the sign up. This is gonna be the same email and password, and we're gonna check that this user exists. So let's jump to our IDE. So the first thing we have to do is set the base URL for the API, and let's name it base URL API. We are going to use this part of the endpoint with the API slug, and as you can see, it's the same for every single request. So let me just put it here, and let's jump to our API template service or page object. In case of API automation, the page object term is really questionable. So let us create a copy and rename it to automation practice API. We're gonna have some default expect status, let it be 200, so we're not gonna change this part, but we will need to add a base URL here, and this is gonna be a string. So this base URL is going to grab the config value of the base URL API. This is the one. Now let's construct the methods which we're gonna be calling in order to test our requests. So the first one is going to be get products, and we will be sending data as an any type of argument. So this is going to be a loop, which means that while the response status is not equal to the expected status, which is 200 in this case, it will resend this request every 5 seconds, unless either the test fails by timeout because we didn't receive the expected status, or we receive the expected status and it matches the one here, and this step completes or succeeds. This is like, I'm speaking from experience. Loops are better in this case just because you may have lags within the database or within the backend and front-end communication or data transferring. The server may be temporarily down, and you know, when you got a loop and the test with some, you know, specific or significant timeout, then it's more chance that it will pass, that some iteration of this request will actually give you the expected status right here and the expected response. So this is why I think it's a good approach right here. So yeah, let's go further. We're gonna call, we're defining the context right here. So this is basically an isolated virtual, I don't know, something like a space where only this request executes and it doesn't, like, so to speak, collide with anything else. There is no third-party cache or, you know, some artifacts from other requests or potential requests. But these tests are simple because we check the request one by one. You know, there can be more complex stuff. So let's go with it. So yeah, and the URL is gonna be like the process env base URL API, and we're gonna add a slug right here, which is products list. And then we're defining a response. We're gonna call some properties of the context. So we will be sending a GET request. Within our context, we're gonna be sending a GET request, and we're gonna send the URL here. We're gonna pass the URL here, and we're gonna send the data. And yeah, in this case, I think that's all we're gonna need here. And then when we receive the response, we're gonna check its status and make sure it equals the expected status. And if it is, we're gonna write it into a variable within the JSON format, which is basically like this. So the data is gonna be represented within like a JSON structure. So an object with properties and nested properties. And we either gonna break the execution of this loop, in this case because it has passed, or we are gonna trigger it again in 5 seconds while grabbing the response, logging it as a simple text, and logging all this stuff right here. So this is a get, I'm gonna change it to get. Then we're gonna wait for 5 seconds and the loop is going to start again. So that is the first request. Now I guess I'll skip to the part when where I have described all 3 remaining requests, so that I don't bore you with my constant mumbling. So I have finished with the descriptions of these API methods. Here we got the register user, we got verify login, and we got the search product. So here we're gonna be passing email and password, which are dynamically generated within the spec with all the rest of the parameters in the body. So this is a form data and we use the form property right here. Same goes for verify login. And let's take a look at the spec. Everything is the same here. We define email and password and we give values a bit later. So in this case, we are hitting the get products API method. And when we have received the response, we are undergoing some assertions. In this case, we're just checking that the response has the products array in the response body. And then it's not empty. So its length is greater than 0. Which is basically this one. The next is we search for a product. Here is the string that we search for, which is men's t-shirt, and once again we get the first array element of the products from the response body, and we assert its name to be man t-shirt. And we assert that the value of this property equals to man's t-shirt. And the last test here consists of 2 API methods or endpoints. So we are registering a new user and later on we check in this user by credentials. So here we give value to the email and password we generated. Then we invoke the register user method with these params and all that body that you've seen there. And we check that the response message has the text of user created. And then we do the same stuff for this user's credentials by invoking the verify login method. And we also check the response body message to contain this string. And if everything goes right, then all these tests shall pass. I've also added a bit of a configuration for the API tests. So this is a specific command here in the package JSON. The specific config, here is the new project right here in the root config, and here is the API config itself. So we got 3 threads because we got 3 tests, and API tests are always like they're way more fast than UI. That's for obvious reasons. You're just operating with the raw data, the separate YAML file for the API test suite. So yeah, let's run it locally. So here we have API test stage. Yep, as you can see, it took no longer than 2 seconds or even 1.5. So all 3 tests have passed here. Now let's trigger the same test in the CI just to complete this part. Okay, so let's make an automatic commit and trigger this flow. So here we are in our workflows. Here is the flow. And let's just wait for it to run. Hopefully it's gonna be good and we will get an alert in our Slack channel. Yep, as you can see, all 3 tests have passed right here. We're generating the HTML report and publishing it, and also sending a Slack alert. Yep, so here our API test stage suite has succeeded, and we gotta wait a little bit for this report to be generated. Well, yeah, here we got our report for the API testing suite, as you can see it right here in the URL. So yeah, as I've said, it takes some time for it to publish. Okay guys, so I think this concludes this practical series. It was an honor and a privilege for me to do this series, because I felt it was the right time for me to finally share my thoughts on this profession, reflect on my career path, and just share with the world the things I've learned, the things I know, the things I operate with. So I'm gonna be adding all the useful information as links in the description for this long video. I hope you liked it, hope you enjoyed it, I hope I was not too boring, but you know, it cannot not be boring at times, because this is a profession, this is something that you do, this is a job, and it pays well, and it pays really, really well. So, if you want to follow these steps, please. If not, at least now you know why. I just hope you guys have great professional journeys, and I just hope that everybody will achieve everything that they want in their lives. So yeah, kudos and peace!